The janitor walked slowly down the long hall, his mop dragging slightly behind him. The polished wooden floor reflected the light from the tall windows, making the room seem brighter than it should have been in the early morning. He had been cleaning this music academy for years, and every corner of it felt like a familiar story. But even though he knew every hallway, every classroom, and every instrument, he often felt invisible. Students and teachers passed him without a second glance, focused on their lessons and performances, while he quietly did his work. He paused in front of the large music hall where the grand piano stood. It was polished to a shine, gleaming under the soft morning light. He had seen the piano countless times, but today it called to him in a way it never had before. The rich girl who often practiced there was nowhere to be seen. She had a reputation for being the best pianist in the academy. Everyone admired her skill, her confidence, and the ease with which she moved her fingers across the keys. To most, she seemed untouchable, like someone from a different world. The janitor, however, had a secret. He loved music too. He had never had the chance to learn formally, but he spent every quiet moment imagining melodies and tapping rhythms in his head. The piano before him was like a window to a dream he had never dared to touch. He reached the edge of the piano and ran his hand gently across the smooth surface. The wood was cool under his fingers, and he felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. He knew he shouldn't, but he could not resist. Carefully, he lifted the lid and sat on the bench, his heart pounding in his chest. He lifted his hands above the keys, unsure if he could even play. He tapped one key softly, and a clear, bright note rang out in the quiet hall. It was a small sound, but to him it was magical. He pressed another, then another, each note trembling under his uncertain touch. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the music flow from him. The notes were simple, nothing like the complicated pieces the rich girl played, but they felt alive. He imagined people listening, feeling the music, and for the first time he felt seen, even if no one was there. He lost track of time, caught in the small world he had created with the piano. Then he heard a sharp intake of breath. He opened his eyes and froze. The rich girl stood at the doorway, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. She had returned earlier than expected and caught him mid-tap. He felt a surge of panic. His hands hovered above the keys, unsure whether to run or keep playing. He felt like a child caught doing something forbidden. But instead of anger, he saw something different in her eyes. She didn't look furious. She didn't look disgusted. She looked curious. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, stepping further into the room. Her voice was calm, not scolding. The janitor swallowed hard, words failing him. I was just... He started, but couldn't finish. His usual quietness had returned, leaving him awkward and flustered. "You play?" she asked, tilting her head. There was no judgment in her tone, only genuine interest. He nodded slowly, still unsure of what to say. "Not really," he admitted. I like music." She smiled slightly, a gentle encouragement rather than the dismissive smiles he had imagined from students before. "Come on, play something for me," she said. It wasn't a command, more of an invitation. He hesitated, looking at the polished keys, feeling the weight of her eyes on him. His fingers trembled as he positioned them above the keys again. He pressed one note, then another carefully, almost reverently. Each sound felt louder than before, echoing through the empty hall. As he continued, he began to find a rhythm, a small melody that seemed to come naturally. It was simple and raw, without the precision and perfection of the music he had heard played in competitions, but it had a warmth and honesty that filled the room. The rich girl stepped closer, listening quietly, her expression softening. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed lightly, letting the music wash over her. There was a pause in her movements, as if the notes were speaking to her in a way words could not. He felt a small spark of pride. For the first time, he realized that maybe his music could matter. Maybe it could touch someone. His fingers moved more confidently now, exploring the keys, creating a pattern of sound that was uniquely his own. The room seemed to shrink around him, focusing only on the piano and the notes he coaxed from it. He forgot about his job, about cleaning, about being unnoticed. There was only the music and the girl listening. When he finally stopped, he felt a flush of embarrassment. He had revealed himself, his passion, something he had kept hidden for so long. He expected her to leave, to dismiss him, but she didn't. She took a step forward and nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, but it was enough to make his heart lift. "That was really good," she said softly. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. He looked at her, surprised. "Really?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, smiling now. "Yes, you have a gift. You just don't know it yet." The janitor felt a mix of disbelief and joy. He had spent years feeling invisible, thinking that his love for music was meaningless. And yet, here was someone he had always admired from afar, acknowledging it. It was a strange, wonderful feeling, like a light turning on in a dark room. For a moment, he didn't know what to do with the attention. He was not used to being praised, not in a way that felt real. "Maybe I could show you some more sometime?" he asked cautiously. It sounded like a question, a hope. She nodded again, this time with more certainty. "I'd like that," she said. Her words were simple, but to him they felt like permission. They felt like a door opening to something he had only dreamed of. The bell in the hallway rang, signaling the start of classes. She glanced at him, then at the piano. "I have to go," she said, walking toward the door. "But don't stop playing. The music. It's important." He watched her leave, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and longing. The music lingered in the hall, echoing softly in his mind. He sat there for a while longer, letting the silence settle around him, thinking about what had just happened. For the first time, he felt seen, appreciated, and part of something bigger than his daily chores. As he resumed his work, pushing his mop across the polished floor, he found himself humming the melody he had played. It was a small, private joy, but it made the day feel lighter. He realized that this moment, brief as it was, had changed something inside him. He had touched the piano, yes, but more importantly, he had touched the world of music in a way he had never imagined possible. That night, after everyone had left, he returned to the hall. He sat at the piano again, letting his fingers find the keys naturally. The room was empty, silent, but the memory of her words and her eyes stayed with him. He played longer this time, exploring different notes, letting the music flow freely. Each sound felt like a step toward something he had longed for but never dared to reach. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if he would ever play in front of anyone again, or if he would remain the janitor, quietly sweeping floors and cleaning halls. But for the first time, he felt hope. He felt that maybe, just maybe, music could change his life, and that he could step out of the shadows and into a place where he belonged, even if just a little. And that hope, fragile and new, made his heart beat with a rhythm stronger than any melody he had ever played. The next day, the janitor arrived at the academy earlier than usual. The halls were quiet, and the sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. He moved with his usual careful steps, carrying his cleaning supplies, but his mind was elsewhere. The memory of yesterday, of the rich girl watching him play, refused to leave his thoughts. He wondered if it had been real, if she truly cared about what he could do, or if she had just been polite. The idea that someone like her could see something in him was almost unbelievable. He paused outside the music hall, listening. He could hear the faint sound of a piano playing, though it was distant. His heart raced. Maybe it was her practicing early in the morning. Maybe she had remembered him, the janitor who dared to touch the keys. He hesitated, then opened the door slightly and peeked inside. She was there, alone, playing a complicated piece. Her fingers moved gracefully, creating a melody that seemed to float in the air. He watched for a moment, mesmerized, before quietly stepping back and leaving the room. Throughout the day, he worked with a lighter step. Every sweep of the floor, every polish of the wood seemed less like a chore and more like preparation. He imagined the piano waiting for him after the hall was empty, ready for him to play again. The rich girl's words echoed in his mind. She had said he had a gift. He tried to repeat the melody he had played yesterday, but without the piano beneath his fingers, it existed only in his imagination. Still, it was enough to make him smile. Later that afternoon, as he was pushing his mop down another hallway, he saw her again. She was coming out of a practice room, carrying sheet music and humming softly. When she noticed him, she smiled. It was small but genuine. He nodded back, feeling his face warm. She approached him and stopped, holding out a small piece of paper. On it were notes for a simple tune carefully written. "I thought you might like to try this," she said. Her voice was quiet, not meant to draw attention from anyone else passing by. "It's easy at first, but it has a nice rhythm. You can practice whenever the hall is empty." He accepted the paper with trembling hands. I don't know if I can," he admitted. The words sounded weak even to his own ears. He had never had formal lessons, never read music properly, and now here she was, offering him guidance. It was overwhelming. "You can," she said simply, with a firmness that left no room for argument. "Just try. Play what you feel and don't worry about mistakes. The piano doesn't judge." She smiled again, this time giving a small nod before turning to leave. He watched her go, clutching the sheet music like it was the most precious thing he had ever held. That evening, after the academy was empty, he returned to the music hall. The air smelled faintly of polish and old wood, comforting and familiar. He placed the sheet music on the piano and took a deep breath. He had never played by reading notes before, but he did his best to follow the markings. His fingers were clumsy at first, pressing wrong keys, but slowly, the tune began to take shape. He played and replayed over and over until it felt like it belonged to him. As the days passed, he continued to practice in secret, always after the academy emptied. Each time he played, he grew more confident, more comfortable with the piano. The rich girl would occasionally glance in, catching him in mid-play, and offer encouragement. Sometimes she would hum along quietly, other times she would leave a note with tips and small suggestions. Each interaction, no matter how brief, filled him with a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. One afternoon, as he was cleaning near the music hall, he heard a group of students laughing in the hallway. He recognized some of them. They were the ones who often teased others for mistakes or clumsiness. They were joking about the upcoming recital, boasting about their own skills and dismissing anyone who wasn't already a prodigy. The janitor felt a familiar pang of invisibility. He knew he wasn't a student, and in their eyes, he would never be considered talented. He turned his head, pretending not to hear them, but the words stung more than he wanted to admit. Later that day, the rich girl found him by the piano. She had noticed the expression on his face when the other students laughed. "Don't let them bother you," she said softly. "Talent isn't measured by their approval. You have to play for yourself, not for them." He looked at her, absorbing the words. They were simple, but they carried weight. She had no reason to defend him. She could have ignored him entirely, yet she cared. Her belief in him, even in small moments, strengthened his own belief. It was a new feeling, being seen and understood. Over time, he began experimenting with different melodies, mixing simple tunes with the rhythms he remembered from his imagination. The piano became a friend, a confidant. He played when he was happy, when he was tired, when he needed to forget the world outside the music hall. The rich girl noticed the progress and sometimes stayed to listen quietly, never interrupting, letting him find his voice. One day, she approached him with a different suggestion. "You should perform in front of others," she said. "Not for them, but to see how it feels. You might surprise yourself." The idea terrified him. He had never played for anyone but the empty room and her quiet presence. The thought of people watching him, judging him, made his stomach churn. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he felt a spark of excitement. The piano had given him a taste of something bigger than cleaning floors or going unnoticed. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could take a step further. He started small, playing for the cleaning staff and a few friendly teachers who were already familiar with him. They listened politely, some with genuine interest, others with mild curiosity. But for the first time, he didn't mind their opinions. He was learning to play for himself, to trust the music, and to trust his own ability. As the weeks passed, he began noticing subtle changes in how people regarded him. Teachers would nod in approval when they passed the hall. Students who had previously ignored him now offered small smiles or greetings. It wasn't fame or praise, but it was recognition, a sign that he belonged somewhere beyond being invisible. And it all began with the simple act of touching the piano and having someone believe in him. The rich girl continued to be a quiet guide, offering advice, encouragement, and occasionally challenging him with slightly more difficult pieces. Each challenge pushed him to improve, to discover new techniques, and to explore the depth of his own skill. He found himself eagerly awaiting her visits, the small moments when she would peek in, give a nod, or leave a note on the music stand. Her presence became a source of motivation, a reminder that his efforts mattered. One afternoon, as he practiced a particularly challenging piece, she entered quietly and listened without saying a word. When he finished, he braced himself for critique, expecting her to point out every mistake. Instead, she smiled and said, "You're ready. You just need to believe it too." Those words stayed with him long after she left. He realized that the journey he was on was more than just learning to play the piano. It was about confidence, courage, and understanding that even someone invisible could create something remarkable. The music hall had become a place of transformation, not just for his skills, but for his sense of self-worth. By the end of the second part of this journey, the janitor was no longer just a quiet man cleaning floors. He was someone discovering a hidden talent, someone learning to step out of the shadows, and someone building a bridge between two very different worlds. The piano was no longer a forbidden treasure but a gateway to possibility, and the rich girl, once distant and untouchable, had become a quiet ally in his journey. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he looked forward to it, ready to face whatever came next with the music in his heart. The janitor woke early, the sunlight barely filtering through the tall windows of the music academy. He moved quietly through the empty hallways, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. Today felt different. He could not explain it, but he knew something was about to change. The piano awaited him in the grand hall, polished and gleaming, and for the first time, he felt ready to meet it not just as a janitor, but as someone who could create something beautiful. He sat on the bench, the cool wood under him sending a small shiver through his body. His fingers hovered above the keys, and he took a deep breath, trying to calm the excitement that fluttered in his chest. Today, he would play not just for himself, but for the possibility of others hearing him. The memory of the rich girl's encouraging words lingered in his mind. She had always believed he had a gift, and today he wanted to honor that belief, even if no one else was watching. At first, the notes came out uncertain, shaky, like a child testing the waters. He pressed one key, then another, and slowly the melody began to form. His fingers moved more confidently, guided by the memory of what he had imagined and the small lessons she had given him. The tune was simple at first, almost hesitant, but it grew stronger with each passing moment. The sound of the piano filled the empty hall, bouncing off the walls, echoing in a way that made his heart pound. He lost track of time, completely absorbed in the music. He tried different combinations of notes, experimenting with rhythm and tempo. The piano was no longer just an object. It was a partner, responding to his touch, bringing his imagination to life. He felt a sense of freedom, a release from the quiet life he had always known. For the first time, he understood the power of creating something that could move people, even without words. A sudden sound made him pause. The door creaked open, and he glanced up to see the rich girl standing there. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching him with a calm, approving expression. He felt a rush of embarrassment, unsure if she had expected him to perform perfectly. But then she smiled, small and encouraging, and the tension melted away. Her presence was a reminder, not of judgment, but of support. He resumed playing, letting the notes flow naturally, without worrying about mistakes. He imagined telling a story through the piano, sharing emotions he had kept locked inside for years. There was sadness, hope, longing, and joy all wrapped into the melody he was creating. The rich girl remained silent, listening carefully, her eyes focused on him as if she could see the music he was pouring out. It was a private audience, yet it felt more important than any public recognition. Minutes passed, and he was unaware of how long he had been playing. The melody became richer, more complex, moving from soft, hesitant notes to bold, confident chords. His fingers danced across the keys, guided by instinct and emotion rather than technique. He was not a trained pianist, yet the music sounded alive, vibrant, and authentic. He felt a deep connection to the instrument, as though they were speaking the same language, sharing secrets only they could understand. When he finally finished, he leaned back slightly, breathing hard, heart racing. He was afraid she would criticize him or look disappointed. But instead, she took a step forward, smiling more openly now. Her eyes sparkled with admiration and genuine surprise. "That was amazing," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and honesty. "You didn't just play the notes, you told a story." He stared at her, feeling a mix of disbelief and pride. Her words were powerful, giving him a sense of accomplishment he had never known. He had played in secret for so long, imagining what it would feel like to be heard, and now it was real. Someone had truly listened, truly understood. "You really think so?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. She nodded. "Yes, you have something rare. Not everyone can make music feel like that." Her praise ignited a fire within him. He realized that talent wasn't just about technique or practice. It was about passion, honesty, and the courage to share a part of yourself. For years, he had hidden his love for music, thinking it didn't matter. Now he knew it did. It mattered not just to him but to anyone willing to listen. Over the next few days, he continued practicing, pushing himself further than ever before. Each session was a journey, exploring the limits of his own ability. Sometimes he made mistakes, hitting wrong keys or losing the rhythm, but he no longer feared them. Mistakes were part of learning, part of creating, part of growing. The music hall had become a sanctuary, a place where he could express himself freely without judgment. The rich girl remained a quiet presence, offering occasional guidance, but mostly letting him find his own path. Her support was steady and reassuring, giving him confidence without pressure. She would hum along sometimes, nodding to encourage him, or leave small notes suggesting subtle changes to his playing. Each interaction, small as it was, reinforced the idea that he was capable of something remarkable. One afternoon, he stayed later than usual, lost in a new piece he had composed in his head. The sun had begun to set, casting long golden rays across the hall. He was so focused that he didn't notice the door opening again. She stepped in quietly, standing a few feet away, watching him with a soft smile. When he finished, he looked up and met her gaze. "That was beautiful," she said simply. "You should share it with more people." The thought terrified him. The idea of playing for an audience, of having others judge him, was overwhelming. But there was also a strange excitement. For the first time, he imagined himself not just as a janitor who loved music in private, but as someone who could create and share. The idea of performing for others, letting them feel the music he felt, began to seem possible. She noticed his hesitation and added, "Start small. Play for someone you trust. Then you can build from there. Don't rush it." Her words made sense. He didn't have to face a large audience immediately. He could take it one step at a time. That night, after everyone had left, he played for the cleaning staff, quietly inviting a few teachers who were kind to him. He was nervous at first, but as the music flowed, he felt a sense of pride and joy that was entirely new. The listeners were polite, attentive, and occasionally whispered compliments, but more importantly, he realized that he could touch people with his music. That feeling, more than anything, was intoxicating. Over the next week, he continued practicing and performing for small, trusted audiences. Each time, he grew more confident, more comfortable with the idea of sharing his music. The rich girl continued to guide him, offering encouragement and challenges that helped him improve. He learned to play with emotion, to convey feelings through each note, to tell stories without words. One morning, as he practiced a particularly complex piece, she appeared unexpectedly and watched silently. When he finished, he waited for critique, but she only smiled. "You're ready," she said softly. "When the time comes, you'll know." Her words stayed with him. He didn't know when the time would come or what it would feel like, but he felt a new sense of purpose. The piano was no longer just an escape. It was a path forward. It was a way to be seen, to connect, and to express the parts of himself he had kept hidden for so long. By the end of this period, the janitor was no longer the timid, invisible man who cleaned the hallways. He was someone discovering his true potential, someone learning to share his passion, someone stepping into a world he had only dreamed of before. The piano had given him a voice, and the rich girl had given him the courage to use it. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would never stop playing, never stop believing in the music within him, and never stop embracing the moment that had changed everything. The janitor arrived at the academy before sunrise, his steps lighter than usual. The hallways were still and quiet, and the early light painted long golden streaks across the polished floors. He carried his mop and bucket as always, but his mind was focused on the piano waiting for him. Today felt important, though he didn't know why. Perhaps it was the feeling that he was on the edge of something new, something bigger than himself. He entered the music hall and sat on the bench, letting his fingers hover above the keys. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the sound of music filling the room, echoing off the walls. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from excitement. He knew he had grown more confident in the past weeks, and today he wanted to explore even further. He wanted to see what he was truly capable of. He began to play softly, a melody that had been forming in his mind for days. The notes were gentle at first, tentative, but they gradually grew in strength and complexity. His fingers moved with more ease than ever before, each note flowing naturally into the next. He was no longer thinking about technique or mistakes. He was simply letting the music come from within him. The hall seemed to breathe with him, alive with the sounds he created. Midway through his practice, the rich girl appeared at the door. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, and watched silently. There was no judgment in her eyes, only curiosity and encouragement. He felt a small wave of nervousness, but instead of stopping, he let the music flow, letting her presence guide him rather than intimidate him. Each note felt more expressive, more real, as if he was telling a story only she could understand. When he finished, he sat back, breathing heavily. His heart was racing, and his hands tingled from the effort. He looked at her, expecting silence or critique, but she smiled warmly. "That was incredible," she said. Her voice was soft but full of sincerity. "You've grown so much. I can hear your heart in the music now." He felt a rush of pride and gratitude. For so long, he had been invisible, unnoticed, and now someone not only saw him but appreciated the passion he had kept hidden. "Thank you," he whispered. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he could manage. She stepped closer and handed him a small notebook. Inside were notes and suggestions she had written, guiding him through new techniques and exercises. "Try these," she said. "They'll help you explore different sounds and emotions. You can experiment, and I'll be here if you need help." He accepted the notebook carefully, feeling its weight and the care she had put into it. It was more than just guidance. It was a symbol of trust and belief. He spent the rest of the day practicing the exercises, feeling the piano respond in ways he had never imagined. The music became a dialogue between him and the instrument, a conversation filled with emotion and expression. Over the next few days, he practiced tirelessly, mastering new pieces and improvising his own melodies. The piano had become a part of him, and he could feel his confidence growing with each session. The rich girl continued to observe quietly, offering advice when necessary but mostly allowing him to discover his own style. Her presence was comforting, a reminder that he was not alone in his journey. One afternoon, as he played a particularly emotional piece, she entered quietly and sat in the corner. He noticed her eyes glistening with emotion, and for the first time he realized the impact his music could have on others. He played with more intensity, letting the notes carry his feelings, and watched as she reacted, moved by the performance. It was a revelation. Music was not just a personal escape. It could touch others, convey emotion, and create connections. After the performance, she approached him and said, "You should share this with more people. They need to hear what you can do." He felt a wave of fear and hesitation. The thought of performing in front of an audience, of exposing himself in a way that left him vulnerable, was overwhelming. But her eyes were filled with belief, and he realized that she had faith in him. If she believed, maybe he could too. She suggested a small recital, just a few students and teachers he could trust. It would be a first step, a way to experience performing without the pressure of a large audience. The idea still made him nervous, but he agreed, knowing it was time to challenge himself. He began preparing, practicing with purpose, refining each note, each pause, each rhythm. The piano became his teacher, guiding him as he worked to create music that was both technical and emotional. The day of the small recital arrived. The janitor stood nervously behind the curtain, listening to the soft murmurs of the audience. His hands were clammy, and his heart raced, but he took a deep breath and remembered the rich girl's words. "Play for yourself, not for others." With that in mind, he stepped onto the stage and sat at the piano. He began to play softly, gradually building into a strong, flowing melody. Each note carried emotion, telling a story that was uniquely his. The audience sat in silence, captivated by the unexpected talent before them. He could feel their attention, but he did not falter. The music was a bridge, connecting him to the listeners, and he realized that fear had no power over him in this space. He played with freedom, confidence, and honesty. When the last note lingered in the air and faded, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then applause filled the room, gentle at first, then louder, warmer. He looked up to see the rich girl smiling proudly, her eyes shining with pride. The janitor felt a rush of emotion he could hardly describe: pride, relief, and a deep sense of belonging. After the recital, several students and teachers approached him, praising his performance and asking how long he had been playing. He smiled shyly, realizing that he had not only impressed them but had earned their respect. The music had given him a voice, a way to connect with others, and for the first time he felt truly seen. In the days that followed, the janitor continued to play, both privately and for small groups. His confidence grew, and he began to experiment with composing his own pieces. The piano became more than an instrument. It was a companion, a channel for his emotions, and a bridge between his quiet life and the world around him. The rich girl remained a steady presence, offering guidance, encouragement, and friendship. Through this journey, he realized that talent alone was not enough. It was belief, courage, and perseverance that made the difference. The piano had given him an opportunity, but the belief of someone who saw him mattered just as much. He had discovered that even someone who had been invisible for years could leave an impression, touch lives, and be recognized for their passion. By the end of this period, the janitor was transformed. He was no longer just the quiet man cleaning the halls. He was a musician, a performer, and someone who had found his place in the world. The piano had unlocked a part of him that had always existed, and the rich girl had been the key to opening the door. He didn't know where the path would lead next, but he knew he was ready to continue, to embrace every note, every melody, and every opportunity that came his way. Music had changed him, and now he was ready to share that change with the world. The day of the big performance arrived, and the janitor woke early with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The academy was bustling with energy, students and teachers moving about, preparing for the event. Today, he would play not just for a few people he trusted, but for a larger audience. He felt the weight of the moment, but he also felt ready. The piano had been his companion, his teacher, and his friend, and now it was time to show the world what it could do. He arrived at the music hall, the grand piano waiting for him in its usual place. He ran his fingers lightly over the polished surface, drawing a small comfort from its cool touch. The hall was empty for now, but soon it would be filled with people, all eyes on him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in his chest. He reminded himself of all the practice, all the small victories, and all the encouragement he had received from the rich girl. He was not alone, and he was ready. The audience began to fill the hall, and he could hear the soft hum of conversation. Students, teachers, and staff took their seats, unaware of the surprise that awaited them. The janitor stood at the edge of the stage, taking one last look at the piano. It had been his secret for so long, and now it was about to be shared. He stepped forward, sat on the bench, and placed his hands above the keys. The moment was heavy with anticipation, but also with possibility. He began to play softly, letting the notes flow naturally. At first, the audience was silent, unsure of what to expect from the janitor who had always been in the background. But as the melody grew, so did their attention. The music was full of emotion, telling a story of struggle, hope, and discovery. His fingers moved with confidence, each note carrying a piece of his journey. The audience began to feel the depth of the performance, drawn into the world he was creating. The janitor lost himself in the music, unaware of the eyes watching him. He played with freedom and honesty, letting the piano express what he could not put into words. The rich girl watched from the side, her face glowing with pride. She had believed in him from the beginning, and now she saw the world responding to his talent. The hall was filled with a sense of awe and respect, the music bridging the gap between the janitor's quiet life and the audience's world. As he reached the climax of the piece, his fingers danced across the keys with a combination of skill and emotion that took everyone by surprise. The music swelled, powerful and moving, filling every corner of the hall. Some audience members closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, while others leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected brilliance before them. The janitor played with a courage he had never known, feeling the connection between himself, the piano, and the listeners. When the final note faded into silence, there was a moment of stunned stillness. The audience remained quiet, absorbing the impact of what they had just heard. Then, slowly, applause began, growing louder and more enthusiastic. The janitor looked up, his heart pounding, and saw the rich girl smiling proudly. He realized that for the first time he had truly been seen, not just as a janitor, but as a musician, as someone who had a gift to share. People approached him afterward, praising his performance, asking how long he had been playing, and expressing admiration for his talent. He smiled, feeling a mix of humility and pride. The recognition was new to him, but it was also affirming. All the years of quiet practice, of dreaming in secret, had led to this moment. He felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before, a connection to a world that had seemed out of reach. The rich girl came forward, her eyes shining with emotion. "You did it," she said softly. "I always knew you could." He nodded, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought him here. She had been his guide, his supporter, and now she was sharing in the triumph. The bond between them, built on trust and shared love for music, had grown stronger than ever. In the days that followed, opportunities began to open for the janitor. Teachers suggested that he perform at other events, students asked him to teach them small techniques, and the academy began to recognize his unique talent. He continued to play, both for himself and for others, each performance more confident than the last. The piano was no longer just a secret. It was a bridge to a new life. He still maintained his role as janitor, but it no longer defined him. He had discovered a new identity, one built on his passion and skill. The music hall had transformed from a place of work to a place of growth, creativity, and connection. Every note he played reminded him of the journey he had taken, from a quiet observer to someone who could move others with his art. The rich girl continued to support him, offering encouragement and guidance when needed, but also allowing him the freedom to grow independently. Their partnership, though unconventional, was rooted in mutual respect and understanding. She had seen his potential and nurtured it, and he had embraced the challenge, proving that talent, combined with courage and opportunity, could overcome barriers. One afternoon, he was invited to play for a larger audience outside the academy. He was nervous, but he remembered the feeling of the first small recital, the encouragement of the rich girl, and the joy of discovering his own voice. He stepped onto the stage, sat at the piano, and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, each note a reflection of his journey. The audience was captivated, and he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had not only played for them, but he had shared a piece of himself. As he finished, the applause was overwhelming. People cheered, clapped, and some even stood to honor the performance. He felt a sense of humility and gratitude, realizing that the music had brought him to a place he had never imagined. The janitor who had once been invisible was now someone who could inspire, move, and connect with others through his talent. In the quiet moments after the performance, he sat at the piano alone, reflecting on how far he had come. The journey had been long, filled with doubt, fear, and uncertainty, but also with growth, discovery, and joy. He had learned that talent alone was not enough. It required belief, courage, and the willingness to take risks. He had discovered that even the most unlikely person could leave a mark on the world. The Academy recognized his contributions, and he continued to perform, teach, and share his music with others. He never forgot the support that had helped him reach this point, especially the encouragement of the rich girl who had believed in him from the beginning. Their relationship was one of mutual respect and shared passion, and it continued to grow as they explored music together. By the end of this journey, the janitor had transformed completely. He was no longer defined by his job or his quiet life. He was a musician, a performer, and someone who had discovered his own strength and voice. The piano had given him a path, and he had walked it with courage and determination. The music had changed his life, and in turn, he had touched the lives of others. He had gone from a man who cleaned halls unnoticed to someone who could fill a room with emotion and beauty, leaving everyone breathless.